Okay, so I just finished Mass Effect Andromeda. Welcome, everybody, to the game review of Mass Effect Andromeda. What a crap show. So, I went into this with very little knowledge of the actual game, aside from the critics panning it and fans of the games absolutely being disgusted with the majority of it. Okay, so I came into this with a little bit of a bias, but not as much as you would think. I was willing to give this game a chance. I wanted to enjoy the experience since the last Mass Effect games I played were 1, 2, and 3. Um, in my previous video, I actually talked about how I was going to play Andromeda, but also I knew about the genocide, which apparently I was also incorrect. The genocide that I was referring to occurred in a DLC for the original Mass Effect trilogy. So, welcome to Andromeda, where you are part of an expedition to the Andromeda galaxy in the Mass Effect universe. So, one major thing left out was there's no Shepard. This happens technically post Rebirth, but you have very little to no knowledge of that actually happening aside from a reference to it in a memory of your father talking about how he was, Shepard is so cool, and that was it. So you play Ryder, male or female, and oh boy, what a show this entire game was for my 20 plus hour playthrough, which I did, and I completed the game, and I'm still debating on going back and finishing the post story mission recap with the crew members. I did almost every loyalty mission except for one that just kept plodding along to the point where I started the last mission and then could not access the last loyalty mission for PB because reasons apparently. So I think my overall feeling of the game was that it reminded me a lot of Mass Effect 2 in the worst ways. And remind me a lot of Mass Effect 1 in the worst way. So there's just so much to unpack. But let's just start with some of the tie-ins. So Mass Effect 1, if you've never played that, and if you haven't, then you're living under some sort of rock, but that's okay. We're gonna get you there. Involved a military human, part of the Alliance, and the Alliance was a group of alien species that had banded together to basically make a UN kind of thing happening on a giant space station that they just randomly discovered and assumed was there for them. And there was nothing weird about that giant space station that they found. But essentially, they discovered fast and light travel using also these constructs that they did not build, that they simply used. That makes sense, right? So, long story short, Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, you can play the same character across all three, and each one has developing and not completely branching storyline, but your choices do affect the outcome of the game and the outcome of certain situations. I mean, you can choose to eradicate a whole race of just weird bug things if you wanted to, and that was fine, and that was your choice because there was a karma system, there was Renegade, there was Paragon. There was so many nuances to the game in a lot of ways. I mean, you would end up just usually trying to be Paragon, trying to be Renegade, especially during 2. Because during 2, you needed to have everyone's loyalty at a certain amount. Otherwise, they could oof themselves and you wouldn't get the best ending and everything else that went along with that. So, bring us to Mass Effect Andromeda. Well, let's see. Oh boy. I think my biggest issue was the the lack of of character development in a lot of ways with the Ryder character. They were the call to action, being the hero Luke kind of thing played into it a lot. Like, oh, you're the daughter of a Pathfinder, and a Pathfinder's used to guide the species, during their time in a new galaxy, and blah 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 blah. So spoilers ahead, but your dad dies immediately like opening round, like, oh, opening round of combat, your dad's looking like he's so cool and runs around, pew pew, shoots everybody, and then just, you know, gets murked and saves you, and then you get to experience most of the game, that involves him as memories that you trigger that he encrypted for reasons beyond my comprehension. I really have no idea why he encrypted his memories and forced you to find locations that you'd never been to that triggered his memories. The entire Oh boy, the entire story makes no sense. Like, oh, you have a brother, but you don't see him really until mid game, and then even then, it's like, hello, brother, goodbye, brother. Not a whole lot to him character depth wise, and then he plays a semi major route where he just kind of yells in the end. Like he plays this part where the big baddie decides to use him to discover how to use this technology that's been in this part of the galaxy forever. And you can kind of see where they're trying to world build, like overall from a developer standpoint. Like you're trying to build this world and you're trying to create it so you can build off of it into other sequels, which is one of the species that's in this galaxy in Andromeda. They're called Angarans, and they look like little cat people, but they also look like lizards. So it's like lizard cat people. But at some point, there's a revelation that they were like created by basically the Prometheans of this world. They were created by an alien species, and the crewmate Jal, who is an Angaran, is like, oh my goodness, I'm a freaking cat lizard person that was made in a lab. And then it's barely mentioned, and it's moved on. And even if you take him, because I played with him and the Krogan the majority of the time, because everyone else's dialogue annoyed the living snot out of me. I could not stand the majority of the crew, aside from the one other Turian. Like the rest of the crew, oh God, the Asarian was so annoying. The two humans were annoying. It was just because most of the game is in what is essentially a Mako with no gun. You essentially just roll around and have to get out of the Nomad, which is what it was called, and it was six-wheeled, but there was no gun. It drove worse than the Nomad worse than the Mako in any of the games. The Nomad was horrendous as a vehicle. It was awful, and you could tell that someone who made this that didn't play either all the original aspects, and B, just saw a picture of the Mako and was like, oh, we'll use that, but we'll take away the gun. We'll take away the gun, and we'll let you upgrade it and change the paint color, which actually I like the paint color changes. That was kind of cool, kind of customization. But overall, when you're driving, your crew, your crewmates, your team talks to each other and has like interactions. But the majority of the interactions are such nonsensical like conversations that for the most part I was like, why? But the Krogan and the Angaran actually have some like interesting conversations, at least from what I saw, because I really didn't use anybody else because half the time I was annoyed with the rest of the crew. So, but there was one scene where he was just like, "Oh, I'm suddenly, I'm made from a test tube." Moved on, and then when we were doing the final mission, he was like, "I recognize this place because genetically he probably would, because genetically the final mission took place somewhere where he would genetically know." Mentioned it 3 times, never mentioned again. Move right along, and so it was just the lack of depth and nuance to these characters. The dialogue tree was weird. I could not remember half the time what the 2 symbols on the bottom with the lines meant, and I would end up picking one and then, oh, we could visit that too. So, Ryder's personality seems like a teenager. There's no maturity. There's no, nuance to her. There's very little flair. Because I played Fem Rider, it was literally like playing a teenage girl. Like, oh, great, we gotta save the galaxy again. Was a lot of like the sentiment that she gave. There was very little to no depth to her character aside from, well, my mom's dead. But that's not true. Mom's technically alive in like a stasis pod randomly for reasons. Because Dad froze her because she had bonitis, but we can't cure bonitis 600 years in the future because bonitis is too hard to cure. So she has to stay in the the cryopod, and you and your brother are like, "Oh, mom's here. That's cool," and then move on and never mention again. And I feel like there's just so many times where it's like, here's a storyline, yeah, it doesn't go anywhere. Or here's a storyline, it has like no major effects. Like I think I got the captain of the main ship killed because I didn't recruit the Pathfinders correctly because I chose Krogan over the Solarians during one mission. That was about it. That was the most choice that mattered. The rest of the choices really didn't matter. The dialogue was so ridiculous. Like, I just don't know. Half the time I was like, what is happening with the dialogue? Because, like, you had, like, quick time events where you could do stuff, and some of it was interesting, and some of it was less than interesting. Most of them were like, do you want to have a romantic relationship that you'll never actually see a fruition? Okay, sure, I want to see a romantic relationship. Because I had a romantic relationship going with Subi, and I was like, this is going to go well. And then it didn't go anywhere. Like, they had the scene where there was like a romantic scene, and then stopped. And then I had a romantic scene with an Asarian who I barely knew, and then stopped. I feel like that's one thing that was really taken away from the original Mass Effect was we will not show any like close-ups of anybody's butt. There will be no scenes that are intimate, and we'll move right along. And even go like there's a ladder that you can go up and down in your Tempest, the main ship, where specifically the camera pans away. You can't see, you're not looking up at your character because obviously they don't want people staring at the character's butt. But, and I say but, in Mass Effect 2, there were so many scenes of Miranda's butt just in conversation where you're like, oh man, that's Miranda's butt again. So it was almost a whiplash to, no, you will not see any intimacy between characters. You'll just imagine it. You will not see any actual, that every camera angle has to be specifically crafted so you're not looking at the female figure, right? That's illegal. We are absolutely not doing any of that. And I mean, maybe that was a sign of the times, when Mass Effect Andromeda was released. And and this is post this is what, like 6 or 7 years after release. Maybe that was the time period. But dear God, you have a bunch of sweaty men playing this game, or sweaty boys playing this game, and you're gonna specifically just be like, no, 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 don't look at that person. Don't have any sort of, impure thoughts about them. We need to just move on, move on. And I think that was like another thing that we had pulled from Mass Effect 1 was just the overall character of Shepard was someone who's moldable. You could really see yourself in him or her if you wanted to. You could kind of play a style that you wanted to. Shepard was confident, was very Captain Kirk-esque, like had that like confidence in himself. He was a war hero, was military, was knew what he was going to do and when he was going to do it, and the lack of self-confidence was very clear in Ryder in terms of the lack of definitive character, the lack of her or him wanting to like really do this. Like there was always a question of like, oh, are you really a Pathfinder? And having to like back that up. And I get that from like an admin standpoint, because the admin staff, for whatever reason they sent these poor people out here, was awful. So they were always like, well, Ryder's not a Pathfinder, and a Pathfinder's so important, and Ryder can't be a Pathfinder. But in the end, it didn't matter what Ryder did, because the storyline just kept going. For lack of anything else, it just kept going. So, from a story standpoint, the game just muddled itself. Muddled and muddled again. Like, you would have all these interactions with people, and you would do all these tasks, but there was very little gravity in it. I never actually saw one of my choices pay off or do much of anything until I read about it later, that you could have saved the captain. That was a giant, rude individual the entire game. You could save the captain, and I didn't save the captain because of reasons. And so in the end, reasons was the only choice that I made that actually impacted it. That was it. That was the end all. Most of my choices had nothing to do with it. I did so many things, and so many people showed up for the final battle, and I remembered none of them. I didn't remember any of who they were, why they were there, except for the Krogan showing up, and that was about it. I remember the Krogan showing up being like, "Oh, the Krogan are here." And I guess the battle could have been harder for me if I hadn't done all that, but in the end, it really didn't matter. It didn't matter at all. So in the end, the story ended up being you were able to stop the Archon, stop the Cat, this overall evil species that was taking, other species and basically indoctrinating them or assimilating them, or whatever you want to call it, because it's just such a trope. Oh, this species finds other species and then turns them into them and copies their genetic material. Okay, tell me something that hasn't been done a dozen more times than that in a sci-fi setting. And overall, I was absolutely annoyed by the end of the entire storyline of just wondering when it was going to end. Like, is this storyline just going to end? How many Go formations are you going to send me on before I finally finish it? And then I finished it, and I was sat wondering why I did any of this. So the gameplay in and of itself was so like by mid game I had a gun, I had a shotgun, and then I played the rest of the game. The leveling was broken. You didn't the leveling system didn't make any sense to me because you're like, oh well, you have access to all the tech and all the biotics and all of these like three categories, and you could switch between profiles, and that again took away so much stuff from the game itself because there was no by the end of it I was like, I don't know why I'm using these points. I don't want to use these points for anything. None of these points do anything for me. It really doesn't matter. The 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 assets of the game were so bad that you would discover something and be like, there was something more here, and you could tell that they cut it. You could tell that somebody went back through and was like, cut this stuff. Don't put that in the game. You could tell each like world was developed by somebody else because there was certain things that they were forced to include, but then you would sit there and wonder like what could have happened. Like there were missions where it was just like a shooting gallery because there's so many shooting galleries in this game. It's Mass Effect 2 style shooting galleries that there was no you could tell like there was supposed to be more and there just wasn't. And then that was the end. And you got the game done and you're like, I finished this game and I don't even care. And that was literally, I think that's my takeaway from this game is, and then they like teased, they're like, oh, look at this big bad villain at the end. Oh, who were they? Oh, it doesn't matter because there will not be another one of these made for a while, I wouldn't think. I don't see how they would suddenly decide, like, I want to play more of this game, unless, BioWare decides to squeeze the bag of Mass Effect milk on themselves again, which in the end, like, was just so bad. It was just the loading screens between each world took so long. The exploration took so long. I went to planet after planet after planet with next to no reason, and I would say I spent probably each session I played, like say I played an hour, probably 5 minutes of the hour was just loading screens going from planet to planet to planet. So overall, in the end here, I just wish they had made another Mass Effect because there was no galaxy ending consequences for this game. In Mass Effect 1, you had the Reapers coming and they were going to restart the cycle of life. And that was like had huge weight to it, huge consequences. This, oh well, you're in another galaxy and there are these aliens that are killing and indoctrinating people. And like, yeah, like there was a story there, but I feel like it just kept getting pulled and stripped away. And what was left was a shell of a game that would have been done so much better. So here we are. I have droned on for 20 minutes almost about how much I don't like this game and how it could have been done better. And in the end, that's what it was. It could have been done so much better, and it just wasn't. And I'm not sure what the next game will be. I think it'll be Sleeping Dogs, which is going to be more retrospective because I played Sleeping Dogs when I was probably, many, many years ago. So hopefully that game held up a lot better. It held up well and not like whatever this was.